I want you to get together.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Biblical Hitman. I'm your host, Steven. I'm here with Jesse. Unfortunately, we are missing out on Taylor tonight. Taylor's out working. He's doing his thing, supporting his family. But shout out to Taylor. Joining us today, special guest, we have on Paul Stobbs. But before we get started, if you're new to the page, if you're returning, and you haven't done so already, please hit that subscribe button, like the show, and please share it with your friends. But tonight's show, we have on Paul. Paul is from the United Kingdom. He is way far away from the United States and Florida, where our studio is at. But we appreciate him being here and giving us his time. He's also the author of the book titled The Nephilim Look Like Clowns. And what an awesome title. It's very catchy, Paul. You did really good work on that. And you did really excellent work on the whole entire book, to be honest with you. I bought it about 3 weeks ago and was able to get through the whole entire thing while, balancing a job, being a parent, and, running a podcast on the side. But one of the best books I believe I've ever read. It was one of those books that I really had trouble putting down, especially like working at the fire department.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, man. I'm reading the book. I'm at work. I get a 911 call. I'm like, oh man, we just started getting into this. Okay, bookmark it. And
yeah, that's more important, believe me. Yeah.
right. So, but no, I'm excited. I'm excited for this show. I've been waiting for this for a long time, and I can't wait for you to take us on a journey. And this is a big moment for us to have you on, and we appreciate you coming on, brother.
No problem. Thanks for having me, and thanks for that very generous introduction there. I'm not sure I deserve such gleaming support and reviews, but I appreciate the support. I really do.
That's a very humble response. That's a good response. No, but real quick, folks, what are the Nephilim? What is their story? And what does the Bible have to say about it? But Paul's going to take us on that journey. And but again, real quick, before we do get started, Paul, just fill us in on what you do and what your life is like over there in the UK.
Sure. So I run a YouTube channel called Understanding Conspiracy. I started it in 2014. It was a project for my university degree at the time. I was doing a fine art degree at Lincoln University. And I got heavily into conspiracy theories in 2012 when the end of the world was right around the corner with the Mayan calendar coming to an end, and it hooked me. I was like, what on earth are these people seeing? What is going on? Why do they think the world's going to end? And it sucked me in, and I've been on a journey ever since, So like I said, those 2 years, I did everything I could to understand everything about conspiracy, all the theories out there, all the subtopics, all the genres, all the factions within the culture of conspiracy. And I set the channel out to kind of make sense of it all and make it more palatable for outsiders to understand just exactly what it is we're trying to do out here to spread the truth and how to best make sense of the truth as much as we can. And yeah, so that's what I did for the early days. I was out there doing what I could to network and grow the channel, and I also became a Christian around the same time because I realized around about 2014, after studying conspiracy for a few years, and coming out of the psychedelic community, having a relatively new age outlook on spiritualism, though I wouldn't call myself a dreadlocked hippie new ager or anything, but I was more of a Gnostic type spiritualism, Taoist type thinker, And coming out of that and learning about the truth of conspiracy led me to the ultimate truth, which is that God is real and so is Jesus, and it's all about what he did, why we even have a conspiracy to begin with. So in 2014, with the channel up and running, it took me a while to kind of get it on board with talking about Christianity, but as I grew in my own faith and my own understanding and began to study biblical history, the channel became about spiritualism, demons, the Nephilim, spiritual warfare, something I had my own experiences with when being saved by Jesus, so it all kind of became one thing where I got hyper-focused on understanding the biblical narrative and the biblical history, and from a contrarian Christian conspiracy theorist standpoint. So I'm a bit of an outsider to churchianity. I don't really know the ground rules or the rules of what it means to be a Christian. I don't sound like a Christian to a lot of people because I don't know the language or the way I'm supposed to behave necessarily. But my faith is 100% in Christ, and that's why I try and focus on my channel today, a decade later. So in 2016, coming out of all that research and having a relatively grounded understanding in biblical spiritualism and the Nephilim, demons, all that history, when I saw the creepy clown sightings of 2016, I knew enough about the occult by that point to understand that, well, nothing gets on that box in the corner of the room unless they want you to see it. So what does the clown mean? It's a symbol for something. Because it wasn't just that people were pulling pranks, and having a laugh before Halloween. It was the obsession from every single news media outlet that got my attention. Why are they all even purporting this? Why are they spreading it? Why is it on every major and minor news network across all the Anglosphere, from Canada, America to the UK? Why? Why would they even bother with such a odd story? And it's because the clown meant something. So I took that hunch and I rolled with it. And I had enough experience with, like I said, DMT, psychedelics, all that type of realm, and knew a lot about that culture and the history of the machine elves and the DMT jesters to know that something fishy is going on in the spirit realm involving jesters. And my biblical history knowledge is telling me the Nephilim are in the spirit realm as disembodied spirits currently. So jesters, Nephilim, clowns being revealed, something odd going on with the occult. Let's see where that leads me. And here I am 8 years later publishing the first book on the topic with a series spanning over 44 episodes, expanding upon the idea. And it turns out, yes, clowns are quite literally a representation of demons and always have been. And they are created specifically by the occult and Freemasonry in the 1800s, modelled after Indian demons called Rakshasa. And the costume is used as a tool by the occult to channel demons, to channel the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim specifically, because you dress like the thing to channel the thing. And the Nephilim, when they walked into the physical realm, looked like clowns.
Wow.
So
Wow. That's amazing, man. I mean, I've always known there's something up with clowns, especially being in, heavy with being in the horror films of Hollywood, and the fact that it just seemed like, why was this character putting on an act? And just digging deep down into it, it's like the clown is a ritual to somehow, as like an offering to these Nephilim. I'm even wondering if it was part of the Anti-diluvian time where the humans who feared the Nephilim, right? If they were paying homage to them by dressing like them and, putting on a play and all this kind of stuff. But you really get into it a lot with your book, and you cover so many bases, and you start with a great foundation. So let's start with the foundation, man. And what's the origin of these Nephilim, and where do they come from?
Okay, so the common misconception about demons, even for most Christians or non-Christians alike, is that demons are fallen angels. That's wrong. That's not biblically grounded. That is just not at all what they are. And that needs to be out the window if you want to truly understand what we're dealing with here. So if you look at Genesis 6, so let's stick to the main scripture to begin with. There's this passage where it says, "And the sons of God came upon the daughters of men, and had basically took them as wives, and had offspring who became giants, mighty men of renown, and they were the kings and rulers of an antediluvian age." And then it kind of skips past all of that and moves on to talking about Noah, and then it kind of goes on to, the lineages and so forth, and Tower of Babylon, and it kind of breezes past it. There's this odd paragraph in Genesis 6, and it's extremely important. And we have to look outside to try and find context for what that passage is, because it's written as though the reader would already know about all that. We don't need to dwell on that, because the book of the Bible is kind of strictly about following the bloodline all the way to Christ. It's about lineages more than anything and following God's people. It's not there to flesh out the history of the Nephilim or the rebellion of the Watchers and all that. That's not what that book is for specifically. But there are books out there that do talk about it. So if we go to the first book of Enoch, first Enoch, not second Enoch or third Enoch, which are kind of later, more modern Gnostic transliterations. But if we stick to first Enoch, which can be found in the Ethiopian Bible, for example, it lays it out quite clearly what happened in that time and what Genesis 6 is actually talking about. And it's talking about a time where mankind was kind of ruled over by what we call watchers, which are basically angels. Now, I speculate through my research, and I try to show why this is the case, that these were likely seraphim class angels, the closest to God, the ones who sing around his throne singing holy, holy, holy. The most trusted confidants of God himself were likely the ones given the privilege of watching over his creation as kind of small gods with a small g, you know. And in a way, they relished in that, and the people treated them as such. I give examples in the book of other cultures where you can find there are examples of brilliantly ordained, colourful, bird-like snake gods kind of being adorned on golden thrones in like South America for the Incas, for example, you know, and it's kind of, they talk about the fall from grace, falling from the world tree to earth, and you're basically talking about, again, the fall of these particular class of angels. So, that being said, the Watchers were watching over humanity, you know. And a lot of my work is based on Gary Wayne's work. So Gary Wayne is quite a well-known researcher in the conspiracy realm. And again, I told you I come at all this from a contrarian Christian conspiracy angle. And I think he's pretty much nailed the history and explaining in Genesis 5, I think it is, there's this odd talking about the creation of Adam and Eve. So when talking about Adam and Eve, or at least the creation of man, it seems like there's two creation accounts. So I explain this in the book, and I don't know fully what I believe on this necessarily. I just know there are alternative opinions on the matter that are worth taking into account when discussing the Nephilim. And it seems there's this odd tale where God says he created man and woman, plural, numerous, simultaneously at the same time, told them to procreate and go and subdue the earth. You know, go forth and multiply. And then it skips forward, and then it talks about God created Adam and put him in a garden in the east, which is obviously Eden. Those aren't the same stories, because we're told God created man and woman, plural, multiply and subdue the earth, become caretakers over it. Then he created Adam and put him in a garden. They're not the same story. So from that, Gary Wayne speculated, and I think he has a lot to back this up and a lot of research to back this up, but it seems like there were two creation accounts of humanity. I'm not saying Adam is different from these other people, just that he was set apart, put aside, put in a garden for a specific reason. He probably might have been of the same kind of person as the first people who were created, but he was chosen to be groomed, in a sense, to become the king of humanity. He walked with God and learned things from God, you know. And then only later did he create Eve from his rib, after naming all the animals. So an indeterminate amount of time kind of passes here. We don't know how long it took necessarily, but it just seems odd. However long it took for people to multiply and subdue the earth, you know. And it seems like the Watchers were tasked with watching over these people. People, a lot of them. And they were worshipped as gods in this ancient time. When Adam was suddenly being groomed in the Garden of Eden, a creature made in God's image, I think some of the Watchers, and it seems like this is what caused the rebellion of the angels to begin with, they didn't like this. They didn't like the idea that an ape-like creature would have dominion over the whole earth and be treated as a king over them, the wonderful angels who helped God create the creation, or at least a part of the creation of God, and are being worshipped as gods. I think jealousy and envy and pride kind of got in the way, and I think this is what kicked off the first rebellion. And this is what caused the serpent in the garden to tempt Eve, to corrupt man, to stunt God's efforts to establish mankind as the dominant ruler over the creation of earth. I think the seraphim angels thought a serpentine creature should be the one to do that, not this human-like creature. So the birds of a feather flocked together. It looks like they talked to the serpent in the garden and sent the serpent out to deceive. People have said the serpent is Satan, but I don't think necessarily that is the case. It could be, perhaps not. I think it's more of a case of whatever the serpent was back then, it's not a snake as we know it today. It's some kind of serpentine-like creature, perhaps humanoid, upright, walking. It could certainly talk. It could certainly wander around the garden and unabashed and unafraid, with no problems. So perhaps it was a creature with arms and legs, which was cursed to eat dust for the rest of its life after doing what it did. So it may have lost those things, and be put into a lesser state. There's a lot of speculation lately on my channel that maybe we're talking about parasites here as worms eating dust, which are technically a metaphor for man, because man was formed from the dust of the earth. So there's lots of ways you could kind of angle out and explain this, and in my book I try and lay out all the theories and ideas, just so you have a broad sense of the possibilities. But whatever happened then, mankind was kicked out of Garden of Eden, and it was knocked off course for God's original plan. And God did say, okay, well, there's going to be enmity between your seed and their seed from now on. But, you will bite their heel, but they'll crush your skull. So he was predicting, God was basically saying, I know your plan. I know you're planning to create some kind of serpent seed race. God, it's God, he knows it all, And he's telling the serpent then, at the very beginning, go and do your rebellion. Do what you're going to do. My son will destroy it all. You will not succeed. That was a foretell. That was the first prophecy of the coming of the Savior of mankind. And a lot of people have argued, well, Cain's the serpent seed, but it does say, Eve birthed a man. I think Cain was just a man, like any other. I don't think he was like some special son of Satan, like a lot of Gnostic thinkers like to throw out there. I don't think there's any precedent, biblically speaking, to say that that's the case. I think the serpent seed that we're talking about is the creation of the Nephilim, which comes by the 6th generation of Jared. So it doesn't even happen in these early days. The Nephilim aren't even around yet, but this rebellion took place out of jealousy and pride of the Watcher class angels. And the book explains this. I've kind of mapped it out probably better than I'm rambling now in chronological order, but I think that was the first injection of jealousy and pride, which caused the first signs of corruption to God's creation, in a sense. It came from the Watchers over the creation of humanity. But then humanity obviously became corrupt as the time went on too. Now Cain obviously murdered his brother and was sent out. And then this is where it gets even weirder. He went to a place in the east called Nod. So this is a place with an established name. It has a name. So people must be around to have named it, surely. And places tend to be populated by people. But who are these people if Adam and Eve were the only humans, supposedly? So this is kind of, again, this is answering, these questions crop up repeatedly, which echo back to this idea. There was the people of day 6, as they're called, who were kind of created, and then Adam was set apart, but failed and was kicked back out into the wider earth with everybody else. Cain even says, God, don't do this to me, my punishment is more than I can bear. People will kill me if you send me out there. Who? Who's going to kill him? If there shouldn't be anybody out there, surely, It's kind of, what's he scared of exactly? So Cain gets the mark, which is a sign that anybody who does any damage to him will have sevenfold the curse on their heads, and it's that kind of thing. And it talks later on how Lamech and Tubal-Cain seem to have accidentally killed him, thinking he was a wild beast of some kind, And there's lots of speculation around what happened there, which we can get into in a little bit. But Cain was basically pissed off with God. He too had jealousy and pride in his heart. Corruption had seeped in. And he went out into the wider world in a state of rebellion against God. He wasn't sorry, he was just sorry he got caught. That's basically what happened there, So he goes off into the world. And I think the Watchers saw this, who were already in rebellion against God and were angry and pissed off with the whole situation. And I think an enemy of my enemy is my friend kind of thing may have gone down here. I think the Watchers saw Cain and said, keep an eye on him. He might be an ally. We could use him in the future. So he builds a city anyway, and he calls it Enoch after his first son. Now, this is not the Enoch who wrote the Book of Enoch I'm talking about. Okay, there's 2 lineages that happened in the early days. There's the lineage of Seth, and then there's the lineage of Cain. And they grow side by side for 10 generations in the Anti-diluvian age. And they share many names. It's by the 8th generation, I think Enoch appears on Seth's side, but the first generation of Cain, his firstborn son, was also called Enoch. Now, Enoch the Bad, we'll call him, of the son of Cain, it seems like he proliferated sun worship, hieroglyphs. He created all sorts of things, bad things. He took the knowledge learnt from the Garden of Eden, passed down to Adam, passed down to his sons, and corrupted it for his own benefit. It seems like Cain was out to control, subjugate, and destroy the earth. He wasn't there to grow with it, keep, look after it, be a caretaker. He built cities. He didn't build agrarian, one with nature, tree huts and things like this. He destroyed things, cut them down, turned them into cubes, and built things from them. He brought with him sacred knowledge, which had been passed down from God to Adam, to his sons. And even Josephus talks about this in the Antiquity of the Jews, I think it is. And it's really odd because he's talking about, in the early days, Cain, it seems trivial to us because we take these things for granted today, but he brought things like weights and measures to the people that were already around. Now, what does that mean, weights and measures? Well, it means he brought the concept of ownership to these people, of land, of division, math, but for one's purpose and gain. You know what I mean? This is mine, that's yours. He brought dividing lines, weights and measures, this definition of that's yours, that's mine, which is seemed to be unheard of for these people originally. But he was like a god to these people. He was Cain, think about it. His father walked with God in Eden. He knew a thing or two. So when he was cast out into the wider world, he took upon himself to subjugate the other humans that were already around, as he was seen as a god with a mark on him that practically made him invincible. So by any definition, Cain was a god. No one could kill him because they would suffer great consequences. He was immortal, kind of, roughly speaking. He could die, but killing him would have serious consequences, so no one would dare. And he had knowledge. And I think during his time, he found his children were no better than his father, and they were also going on corrupting things. So there's tales like the Book of Lamech of Cain, which is like an extra biblical text that kind of has only just recently been released by the Vatican in 2018. But you read this book, and it talks about Lamech of Cain's lineage. So there's a Lamech on Seth's side too, but the Lamech of Cain, and this is the 7th generation, just before the 8th, in which Namar, his daughter, is born, who it's claimed may have been the wife of Noah. So there was a crossover there from the lineage of Cain to the lineage of Seth, which may have caused corruption in the Nephilim after the flood. But again, that's just one theory. But in this story, Lamech is going around trying to find out, who did my great-great-great-great-grandfather mate with to create all these people? If Adam and Eve, he's confused. So it's giving you context at this time. Even the people in that time didn't know their own history. They had been lied to by their fathers, by Cain, and put into a false reality, just like we probably are today. We don't really know our true history. Even Lamech had questions, only 7 generations away from Cain. He's like, this doesn't make any sense. So he went on a mission, teaming up with a giant, by the way, because this was the 7th generation. It was the 6th when Nephilim were introduced. And he went around with this giant trying to ask questions in each village, like, where did you come from? What's your... And it's kind of, why do I have this mark? And he explains that the mark of Cain was leprous white skin. And I'm not talking white people with red cheeks like me. I'm talking like paper white, deathly, odd-looking white skin, like a vampire type stuff, not Caucasian, not slightly less melanated than other people. I'm talking inhuman white. And that's what it says. Because if you look at people with leprosy, they get chalky white skin that flakes off. So right. it's compared to leprosy. So he's going around saying, why have we got this mark? Why don't you? Where did you come from? Who are these people? Why is there so many people around? This shouldn't be the case. And he never got any answers that satisfied him. So he also had this big lizard going around with him, apparently, who he called Leviathan. I don't know if it's the same Leviathan that God created, but he named this lizard Leviathan anyway. So we've got glimpses of giants, hybridized monsters, and the lineage of Cain going around just murdering people to find petty answers to things they don't even understand. Because that's what he does. When they couldn't answer his question, he got his giant to kill them or his serpent to eat them. He's like, I'm sick of this, And then he goes off. Then he goes on to utterly he tries to get to know God, but God doesn't respond to him because of the curse of Cain. And then he says, all right, well, screw you. I'm going to make a religion about this lizard. And he makes a whole religion dedicated to this serpent god, who's right here in front of you people. And then it's just one big long mess. But then his daughter Namar starts whoring around with the angels, and it's a horrible story, and it's really graphic about the kind of disgusting sexual acts that were going on between the angels and humans by this time. It seems all of creation was just utterly corrupt towards these last generations of the Antediluvian age. Even Seth's lineage was getting involved. It was just becoming an absolute mess. Because by the 6th generation of Jared from Seth, the Watchers came down. And this is when we have Genesis 6 being explained. That's when they came down and mated with the daughters of men. It seems specifically the daughters of Cain's lineage, not Seth's. Because it's the enemy of my enemy is my friend situation. I think they saw what Cain had done. They saw what his children were doing. And these people lived for like 800 years, by the way. So Cain was around witnessing all of this. You know what I mean? He wasn't like dead. He was a patriarch still around as a god king during that time anyway, you know, while Seth were doing their agrarian, peace-loving stuff. Cain was going around dominating, building ziggurats and cities and all sorts of things, you know, as a god. So I think the angels came down and made a deal with Cain. And it seems like it was like, look, give us your daughters, give us your granddaughters. We want to mate with them. We want to create this new hybrid race. You'll be rewarded greatly for it. I think Cain was like, I don't care about the reward. Screw God, do it. I'm in. Whatever, you know. So he brought his daughters up to Mount Hermon and the rest, you know, and the Watchers took wives and created these hybridized, half-human, half-angel monsters. And, you know, you look into the stories of Enoch, it talks about the Watchers making a pact with each other. It says, look, let's make a deal upon the mutual implications about what we're about to do. We know the consequences of what we're about to do. There will be severe punishment for this from God, but let's do it anyway. And they all made a pact, like a deal. Like, we're going to do this in spite of the punishment, you know. So it was no trifling matter. They knew the consequences. They knew what they were about to create. And surely they did, and these monsters, these demigods, as the Greeks would call them, they were first considered heroes, because they were like superhuman, supermen. They were insane, you know, they had powers like angels, but they had the strength of like 1,000 men, but they kept growing, they kept getting bigger. And it seems like, according to the tale in Enoch, they couldn't keep them happy with hunger. They just kept getting bigger and bigger, and they kept running out of food to feed them. And then eventually the giants just started eating everything, animals, livestock, and people. And even each other. It turns out the giants were cannibalizing one another as well. And then they soon, very quickly became tyrants. But by this point, they had usurped many of the antediluvian kingships and cities and positions of rulership. Because the angels weren't just making, like, children just randomly. They were specifically targeting the daughters of kings or the queens, or, you know, they were trying to legitimately insert into the thrones of the time legitimate heirs to those thrones. It was a political tactical maneuver by the angels to usurp humanity's dominion and replace it with their own seed. And I believe it was likely the serpent seed, because the angels doing this were the seraphim class angels. Now seraphim means fiery flying serpent. It comes from two words, seraph, which literally means the burning bite of a serpent, and that many variations on that fiery flying serpent is just what seraphim literally transliterates to. So there you go. I think that's what we were dealing with. We were dealing with half serpentine, half human, hybridized giant monsters who had become the kings and rulers of the antediluvian age by the final generations. And this is pretty much what sparked God to say, I can't let this continue. There will be no humanity left by the end of all of this. All of humanity is given in to these gods, are sacrificing to these gods, are trying to be like these gods and changing themselves through some odd genetic corruption, which is talked about in the book of Jasher. So in the book of Jasher, it explains the mixing of kinds began, where mankind was taking the birds of the air, you know, and the beasts of the field, and mixing one kind to another and creating hybrid monsters, as well as mixing mankind with these monsters to create hybridized beasts along with it, chimerid hybrids of some kind. Pick a cryptid. That's likely where it comes from. Wolfman, Dogman, Mothman, Birdman, whatever you want to say, you know, the Nagas, the Serpent People, it's the mermaids, half fish, half human, all these hybridized, humanized things came from this time, and it was taught to them by the Watchers and by the Nephilim when they were around. But it seems like the Nephilim were cut short before the flood. So it explains, and I think Michael was explaining to Uriel while watching the punishment of the Watchers. It's like, this is brutal. So God kind of forced the Watchers to watch their children, the Nephilim, kill each other in petty battles and squabbles. And now you have to bear in mind, these were not small creatures. These were the size of mountains. They're described as the Titans. These children of the Watchers grew to epic proportions, like beyond our comprehension, you know. And I think they had children, and they had children's children, and their children's children's children got smaller with each generational iteration. But the OG Nephilim were like ridiculously tall, just unprecedentedly large.
Yeah.
And this is like the Clash of the Titans. This is the Titanochemy described in the Greek religion, and this is where the gods of Mount Olympus had to fight against the Titans, you know. And the gods of Mount Olympus are the Watchers of Mount Hermon. You know, it's the same thing. They had to kill their own children because their own children thought they could kill their own fathers. They got so full of themselves that they thought, I should be the only rulers of the earth. We're the only ones worthy of ruling over humanity. So they turned against each other to gain dominion over lands, and then turned against their own fathers, the Watchers, thinking they don't need to be there either. So it was a horrible punishment for the Watchers. They had to kill their own children who were trying to kill them, while they also watched their children kill each other. So, you know, Michael describes it. It's like, this is too brutal. This is more than I can bear. This is horrible. This is actually like he is terrified of what he's beholding this punishment to be here. And he even say specifically, there is no way any angel would dream of doing this again, because the punishment is so awful. It's kind of, after witnessing this, the message is sent, you know. So there's this period of time where God says, my spirit won't dwell with man forever. And his life is going to be limited to 120 years. Okay, now people say that means mankind's lifespan's been suddenly cut short to 120 years. But we know that, you know, Noah lived longer than that after the flood. And I think what they were saying is man has 120 years left before the flood comes. I think that's what he was specifically saying. And in those 120 years is when mankind took it upon themselves to start corrupting their own image. So
it's not Billy Carson's telomere shortening.
No, it's nothing to do with the gold on the end of the telomeres or anything like that. No, it's no. This is. I think it was literally a warning. Like, okay, so I'm going to put an end to man as it is, because man right now is so completely corrupted by the Nephilim and what they did that they're going to now go upon themselves to change their own DNA. So, even without the Nephilim around anymore, mankind was too far gone because of what the Nephilim had done and the infrastructure they had created and the knowledge they had taught mankind. Now mankind wanted to be like the Nephilim that once were, so it seems like they were corrupting themselves. And this is what Jasher talks about, the mixing of kinds. With the help of the Watchers who perhaps didn't mate with humans and didn't suffer that punishment. Because after the punishment, those who did mate with humans, the 200 Watcher-class angels, were bound in chains until the end times. So they're out of the picture now. They're gone. They're out of the scene. But I think there were plenty of angels still in rebellion who didn't mate with humans, who were still knocking about. So they have to change tactic. It's kind of like, if we can't create through traditional means our own offspring to corrupt humanity, let's get humanity to corrupt themselves. And I think that's when the mixing of kinds began. And that's what I believe, my theory is, that's where we get all modern day cryptids from, that still continue into today. I think that's when they were first created. So they are like faux Nephilim. These are people who Nephilimified themselves, is like a term I've coined here. They're not the same thing as the Nephilim. But to summarize the history here, it explains clearly that those women who mated with the Nephilim, with the Watchers, they became sirens. So these are half serpent, half woman, fish, primordial gods of some kind. Okay, so we have mermaids being created here, sirens as they're known. And I think they would have survived a flood because they had this water ability. And I think they may have a lot to do with how the Nephilim came after the flood as well. But then you also have people who've chimeraed themselves, who also can survive a flood, because now they have gills to breathe underwater. And I think the marine kingdom is quite a popular mythos that comes after the flood. And perhaps there is a kingdom of people who have hybridized themselves who did make it through the flood. Because we do know for a fact, and this is biblically grounded, the lands of Canaan were full of the Rephaim, which were giants. And the people were as grasshoppers in their sights. So the Nephilim giants did make it after the flood. So, and we have to square that somehow.
Well, and I mean, they had to have survived somehow because you mentioned earlier that the other angels were looking at the repercussions for what the 200 angels who descended upon Mount Hermon did, and no one was going to make that mistake again. No one was going to mess with God at that level. No.
But the second incursion theory is the most popular. Oh, well, angels must have just done it again. And it's kind of, no, I don't think so. I think it was through other means. I mean, Rephaim itself, which is not the word used to describe the first Nephilim, is an interesting word because Rapha is the root, which basically means to heal, or a healed one, or healer of some kind. And when you break Rephaim down, it seems like the root words are implying these are the resurrected Nephilim. They are healed ones. They are the undead Nephilim. They are once dead, now back to life again. So it seems like perhaps the bodies of the Nephilim, which were strewn all over the place, were revived in some way through some magical means. Perhaps Nimrod figured it out. I don't know, during his own rebellion after the flood, and maybe he in some way brought them back. I don't know, but I lay out literally like 20 different theories in the book because there's so many ideas of how it. All we know is it did happen. So you can contend with the why as much as you want, but let's just deal with the facts. They were there after the flood too. So most of the early books are talking about basically Israel dealing with it. And God sends them out there to wipe out the remnants of this corruption. Leave no man, woman, or child left type of thing, Go out there and sort this out. Otherwise, humanity will have a big problem in the future. And they almost do complete the task, but they just fail at the end and don't quite deal with it all. And they lose a lot of land as a result of not fulfilling God's task, But I think this explains why we still have Nephilim around today, like popular modern sightings, like the Lovelock Cave incident for the Paiute Indians, the tall, white-skinned, red-haired giants of the North Americas, the tunic giants of the Eskimo regions, There's plenty of sightings. The Afghan cave giant is quite a popular one. It's kind of, I think we still have remnants around, very small remnants that aren't as tall as the originals because they're like descendants of descendants of descendants of descendants. But I do also think many of the royalty today think themselves to be the descendants of the remnants as well. Right. And this is where you get the divine right to rule, because it's kind of, well, I have angel blood in me. It's kind of, I'm like 1/100th angel. What are you? It's that type of stuff. And so it may be more diluted today. I'm not sure, but that's in a nutshell the story of the Nephilim. And one key thing you have to take from all of it is what happens to the Nephilim when they die physically. And Enoch explains it. They become wandering spirits trapped on the earth. Okay, they are disembodied. But they don't go to heaven, they don't go to hell, they don't go to Sheol, as it's classically understood during this time, obviously before everything changed with Christ. But they are stuck here on earth, because they weren't supposed to exist to begin with. The Nefesh, their soul, if you could call it that, is of the earth. It was made, and it has no dominion or right to leave this place in any way. So when they die, they are stuck here. And Christ described it quite clearly, when an unclean spirit comes out of a man, it wanders in dry places, it hungers and it thirsts and can find no means to satisfy any of these things. It suffers greatly. So, demons are the disembodied spirits of these giants from the Anti-diluvian past. That was their fate, and that's why we even have demons today. That's why they're here. And obviously Christ's work came to finish it and to take away their power and dominion, to crush the skull of the serpent, this serpent seed. And now we have the power to cast these things out, and we have all authority over them in the name of Jesus Christ. So it's finished. They have lost. They're already a defeated enemy. In the modern day, they've just tried to make as many people forget that authority as much as they can to carry on doing what they need to do. And all demons are really interested in is getting out of those horrible dry places. Because these things used to be kings and rulers. These things used to satiate any lust and thirst and hunger they had at any given moment whenever they wanted and pleased. To have all that taken away, to no longer have senses, to have a mouth or fingers or a nose or ears or eyes to taste, see, touch things anymore and experience things. That's all they're after. Anything at all. So this is where possession comes into it. Their goal is to get into human bodies, because when they're in a body, they can experience these things vicariously through a human's senses. It's not as good as having their own body, but it's good enough. And if they get cast out, They're back in the dry places again, looking for another place to get back into, you know. And this is why spiritual warfare is an extremely important topic that I think more Christians need to be hyper aware of and understand, what are we actually dealing with here? What are these things and where do they come from? Because it's all well and good saying, oh, you know, well, they're just unclean spirits. What does that mean? What's their agenda? What do they want exactly? Why? What's the motive? And I think once you understand what I've just explained, it becomes very clear. And they're working in tandem today with secret societies who use them for deals, for power. And my book, as my book goes on to explain, there are many tribes still around today who lived during these times and through oral tradition have kind of passed down the traditional ritual and garb and song and dance and all these type of things. You'll find they dress in ways to represent these ancient gods as they understand them. They call them ancestor spirits, but they're not grandma and granddad. And the way they dress is quite typically, they white up the skin, put on a red headdress, so red hair, white skin, multicoloured fractal patterned clothing or cloth or ribbons or polka dots or paint all over the body. Something we would call a clown in the West. And the reason they're doing it is to let the spirit into their body. They'll tell you that's why they're doing it, to be possessed by the ancestor spirits. And once the ancestor spirit is in, by mirroring it, by dressing like it, creating a channel to the spirit realm, letting the spirit into the body through that means, being a willing vessel by dressing like it, the demon then can experience stuff through the channeler, and the channeler will give it things. It will drink stuff, smoke stuff, have sex, or whatever it is, or murder things, or drink blood, or whatever the demon wants to experience. The channeler, who is willing to let the demon in its body, will do those things, but it's a transaction. What are you going to give me in return? Do you understand? And that's where deals and contracts with these spirits come into it. That's what these tribal cultures do quite often, because, you know, if you're in the middle of a rainforest or something, or in the deserts of Africa but against a warring tribe or something like that, it might be beneficial to not be able to be cut by a blade, or to have the strength of 10 men or something like that, or to the ability to be bulletproof or whatever it is, or the ability to read people's mind. You know, these are advantages that give you over your enemies. So a lot of it is based on transactional ideas like that, you know, and a lot of these cultures are willingly doing these things. And in the West, we're a highly Christianized nation. The Anglosphere, Christendom rules supreme. It's the demons have to switch up tactics. They can't be so brass and open as they are in these other cultures. They can't do that, you know, because all it takes for us is to realize our authority in Christ, and we can cast them out. And they're done for. It's over. You know, they'll be fleeing in no time. So we have this thing called the occult in the West. It's hidden, and it's buried under layers of nuance and symbolism, because the occult and the demons who work with them can't be so out in the open about what they're doing, because, like I said, as soon as we figure it out, they've lost everything. They've got no power anymore, and we can use Christ to defeat them. So they have to hide behind a veneer of something else. So the costume used to channel demons in the West, the same costume they use in these other cultures, is a clown. But what do we think a clown is? Something silly and fun for the kids, not to be taken seriously. But the occult who fashion this costume, they know full well it's a powerful tool to communicate with the demons or the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim. And that's what my book has basically laid out relentlessly, should I say.
Yeah,
So there you go.
I think one of the coolest things that you talk about in your book as well is that a lot of it too, with the fallen angels, with their sons, the Nephilim, a big part of their agenda was to control the narrative and control the narrative in such a way to where I think, even as you describe in your book, in some cultures, such as the flood story, that they blame God into being an evil God and doing it in a sinister way that, you know, where they show the image of God and why he did that to be a bad thing. And it's like that in a lot of numerous amount of cultures, sharing that traditional story of the flood.
Yeah, so that's chapter 8 of the book. It's there. It's the flood. And I basically do recount, as you said, that the flood mythos is everywhere. It's in every single continent. It touched every corner of the earth. there isn't a culture alive that doesn't have some kind of flood myth of some kind. And you'll find there's different variations of it. A lot of it is a Noah copy by different names. A lot of it is like Noah's story, but there's minor changes in ship design and characters involved. But it's kind of like a Noah's story.
Gilgamesh.
Yeah, but it's not quite. It's like... It's not... Yeah, the Epic of Gilgamesh, funnily enough, that's what I'm looking at right now. I explain it all in here. But it's... People try to point to that and say, well, you know, the Noah story is just a bastardization of the Epic of Gilgamesh, you know, like it came before. I said, no, these are stories from the same time of different survivors, different people going through the same experience. So... like I said, you'll find there's carbon copies of Noah's story in some places, mainly the more Anglosphere areas or the Russian Orthodox areas and Siberia, because I think they all told the same story of Noah's survival. But then there's these other cultures, like the Sumerians, who talk about like strange gods and angels coming down to warn giant kings of a coming flood that's coming, and tell them to build a specific boat to help them survive and their family survive. But it's like repeat accounts of that across the earth, and I think this is the Watchers coming down to say to the sons and grandchildren of the Nephilim, you know, the offspring descendants of the original Nephilim. It's like, look, you're a king of the Larsa, for example. The Larsa king is a good example, who was told basically make a cube and get in it because a flood's coming. It's kind of, and I think the Watchers also warned their own offspring, their own children, their own grandchildren, their own corruption, and their own kings that they place in these positions of rulership, who were working on their behalf, who were telling people to worship the pantheons and to worship, you know, the sun and this type of stuff. They warned them too. So you have these odd accounts that sound Noah-ish, but they've got this odd... It's angels coming to them, warning them, not God, and it's this other thing. It's like it's a slightly different story. So a lot of people and naysayers have tried to point to that and say, you know, so these stories are older than the Noah story, therefore it never happened, or it's a bastardized story. But no, these are just accounts of the same event. Now, if it's not the Noah bastardization or the Noah story itself, a lot of them are very odd, and they're about isolated pockets of survival stories. So quite a good one is in Ecuador. And they had this story of these bird people, kind of... So there's these two brothers, all right? And they managed to survive a flood just by the skin of their teeth by climbing to the peak of an extremely tall mountain in the Ecuadorian region. And there's a specific mountain there. You can go and check it all out. So these and they're actually called the Canary people, so named after the bird, okay? So if you want to look up the mythos of the Canary people of Ecuador, you can go find this tale. I'm going to recount it for you here, but basically these two brothers survive because they have the ability somehow to scale a mountain very quickly. So these are superhuman. They're not actually human like us. They have odd powers. So they're likely men who corrupted their DNA somehow during the mixing of kinds the book of Joshua was talking about just before the flood. They Nephilimified themselves. They're humans, but they're like human plus. They've got abilities beyond any other human ability, because not only did they climb to the peak of an extremely tall mountain just in time while a flood is happening, but they also managed to wait up there long enough for the flood to recede. And we know it took about 40 days it took a long time, okay, for that water to disappear. How did they survive? Clearly they had the ability to go without food or water themselves for a very long time, so they weren't human necessarily. They were something else, you know. They'd hybridize themselves with the abilities like animals have. Like camels can go without water or food for a while. Maybe these humans had humps or something, or they did something to themselves to give them these superhuman abilities to be hardier than your average human. So these two brothers survive. And then when the water recedes in the side of the mountain, they find a cave. And then they find offerings of food being brought to them somehow. Food just keeps appearing. And then they discover it's these two bird women, macaw, half parrot, half woman hybrid women, leaving food for them. So these brothers, thankful, rape the two women. That's what they do. They take them as wives and rape them. And it's believed that the entire area was repopulated after the flood by these two brothers and these two hybridized bird women. So these hybridized bird women were likely other humans who had also mixed themselves with animals to survive a flood. So they just fly above the water as it rises and then rest on top of the water afterwards, like birds tend to do, because their bones are probably hollow now and they weigh nothing. Whatever's going on there, I don't know. But it seems like that specific story is like a flood survival myth, but it's specifically to that region, and it has a tale which backs up the biblical narrative that there were people around at that time who were not human anymore, were kind of like human but not, who had mixed themselves with animals.
Right.
And
that's what you were saying earlier. Sorry to cut you off. You were saying, you got dogmen, you got Bigfoot.
All that stuff, yeah.
These things figured out how to survive. They are a mix, chimera, like you were saying. It's fascinating, man. I believe it.
I think a lot of them survived above the water or in the water with gills or underground. Because I explain it in the book, but it seems a bit like legalese, but there are loopholes in this flood narrative that can play out to there being survivors. And I kind of did lay out, if you look at the description in the Bible, first of all, define what's alive. Are these things already dead, spiritually speaking? So you can have that loophole as well. So nothing that God ordained as living or worthy of living with a soul lived other than Noah and his family. Because these humans who Nephilimified themselves probably went the same way as the Nephilim. When they die, they're trapped on earth now because they corrupted the image of God. To corrupt the image is also to corrupt the soul. So you make yourself incompatible to leave the earth. I assume something like that may have happened. So there's that one legal loophole. Then it's saying, it doesn't mention anything about the creatures underground, just on the ground. So it's kind of, there are things like this, And if you've, merged yourself with a bear, maybe you can hibernate underground and wait out the flood or something like that. You have this hibernation gene attached to you now, where you can go long periods without food or water and sleep it off or something. There's many ways, the Native Americans have loads of myths about where they come from, and they said they lived underground with ant people. And then they came out of the ground with them, and the ant people stayed under. That's odd, isn't it? When you really think about it, like, how does that make it? Well, if there's this huge flood, it makes sense to wait out underground. And there's tunnels of underground networks all over the earth that are vast and unexplored even, or blocked off. And it's kind of, there are ways things can make it after the flood to bring that corruption across, which would lead to the lands of Canaan being populated by giants once more. Way after the fact,
Right.
So it's an interesting tale. There's just some of the tidbits and stories I go through, but the flood mythos. Because at the end of the day, with my book, I'm also trying to convince atheists and answer their questions that they always often have for us. No, they often have these gotcha questions, don't they? And it's kind of like they have very two-dimensional understandings of biblical history. I'm trying to give them the more fleshed out understandings of what may have actually gone down during this time, so they have a broader sense of what was really going on. And I don't have any definitive answers for what the true narrative is necessarily, but there are many ways we could interpret what happened that led to what we have today. And that's kind of what I'm mapping out here. So I've written the book in a way that, even people who don't even know Christianity could understand. I'm trying to lay it all out in black and white for them from a Christian conspiracy theorist contrarian viewpoint. So you're not going to hear this in Sunday school. You're not going to hear this in your church from the pulpit.
Not. Absolutely not.
It's definitely an odd one for most Christians.
I wish we would hear it more in the church. I think that it could do some sort of prevention against, just more people falling away from the faith, especially with all the false narratives being pushed out there by all these other, these agents that are out there. I kind of call them, pushing, the New Age and all this other kind of stuff. But just to kind of piggyback on top of what you were saying about these Nephilim were breeding with, animals and things like that, it just made me think of that it would be the fastest way to push an evolutionary process. And in their form, it would be a style of genetic engineering. Like it's at its finest, and maybe there was some sort of high tech. I don't know. I want to get your thoughts on that. What do you think the technology was like in those times?
I think it was far beyond anything we can comprehend. I don't think it was anything like what we do today. I think, like I said, these people were the closest to God when you think about it.
Right.
I don't think we're getting better with time. I think we're progressively getting worse.
Like
so
yeah,
I think these people lived for hundreds of years, so they had time to figure some stuff out. They're not like us, and the world they lived in is not our world. it doesn't look anything like what we live on today. I think what we live in today is a ruinous heap compared to what the world was at one point. I think even the fauna, the trees, everything was different. And I'm not saying it was like Avatar, kind of like Avatar, but also industrious. I think they had buildings and skyscrapers and everything going on. I think they were highly advanced. I think when Cain built cities, he built cities. It wasn't a joke, And I think the population at that time was huge, enormous, in the billions. It wasn't what we have today. And the reason I say billions is because I think, don't forget, all these people were corrupted and died in a horrible way. I think they may consist of the army of Gog and Magog at the Great White Throne Judgment final war at the end of time. I think they'll be resurrected in some way. Their spirits are brought back to the earth in some way to make a army the number of the sands of the sea. So I think there was billions upon billions upon billions of these people at the time. I think they had epic cities. I think it was far beyond our comprehension of what these times truly were. And I think the deluge truly was a deluge that wiped the slate clean. And there's nothing left. There's nothing, Maybe a few megalithic structures here and there, which are like the worst or the least of what was going on at the time, But
a couple of big tree stumps, massive tree stumps,
something like that. Exactly. Which was said to be cut down by the angels to stop the giants from climbing them to escape the flood.
Okay, I was going to ask you. Okay, so describe that real quick, because I find it fascinating. You look at the Devil's Tower, which I believe is in Wyoming. Mm-hmm. You look at a lot of these other structures. You even see one. I can't remember where this is, but it looks like an axe is still laying on the tree that has been cut down. It's fascinating. So why would they cut down these massive trees? What was the point of that?
Well, again, it was to stop anything surviving the deluge. Because I believe we're in an enclosed system. I don't know where you stand on biblical cosmology, but when you're basically in a giant snow globe, the only way is up when it comes to a flood. And it's
that is fascinating, man, because I always wondered why. I'm 100% positive. Before I even became a Christian, I had kind of a similar story as you. We come to the end of the Aztec calendar, and was it the Aztec or Mayan?
It was Mayan, I believe. Yeah.
It was Mayan. Okay, so we come to the end of their calendar, and we're like, "Oh, the world's going to end. The poles are going to shift." And then I go into this, this conspiracy guy that just is crazy and trying to look into everything. But I came across all these trees that they're mountains. They're petrified now, so they look like rock. They pretty much are rock. But it's just clear. It's very clear that they're cut down trees. And I always wondered, they're all over the world, what would be the point of cutting these massive trees down? And that makes so much sense that it would be to keep these giant Nephilim from climbing the trees out of the flood. It makes wow.
Well, what if you think about it this way? What if the Nephilim were trying to get rid of all the wood before Noah was able to use it to build his ark?
That's interesting. It's an interesting take. I'm open to anything when it comes to that, to be honest, because I don't know. I wasn't there. So all we can do is speculate. But we certainly see what look like giant tree stumps everywhere, and they call them like plateaus and mesas and stuff like this. And it's kind of I don't know. But in Daniel 4:23, it does specifically say, "And whereas the king saw a watcher and a holy one coming down from heaven and saying, Hew the tree down and destroy it, yet leave the stump of the roots thereof in the earth, even with a band of iron and brass in the tender grass of the field, and let it be wet with the dew of heaven, and let his portion be with the beasts of the field, till 7 times pass over him." So we are talking there about a watcher coming down and cutting down trees. So it's not unprecedented for angels to come down and cut trees down, biblically speaking. So,
which verse is that?
That was Daniel... Oh, I've lost it now. 4:23.
Daniel 4:23. Love it. Love it. I love this stuff, man. Baby. Yeah. I've been trying to tell people forever about the giant trees, and the pushback is just incredible because it's clear as day. If you have eyes, you can see that it looks clearly like a tree. A lot of these plateaus, as you say, and then you look into the scientific explanation of how these plateaus and the Devil's Tower formed, and it is absolutely ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Yeah. It doesn't make any sense at all.
But people also say, well, trees were bigger then because people were bigger then, and it was more oxygen-rich atmosphere then. Things were just different in general, so everything was just bigger, you know. So there is that too, possibly. I don't know if you know much about biogeology. Have you heard of that before? Or
maybe
geobiology. There are some. Stellium 7's a good guy out there doing a lot of research into who I've talked to, but there are others, and it's this idea that, you know, like, mountains and rock formations and things we see are basically these petrified giants, and we're living in the carcasses and remains of giants.
I'm here for it.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
again, what do I got right here? What, you know, I always thought it's funny. We talk about this Himalayan salt.
It's a hunk of meat you've got there, basically.
It's a hunk of meat, basically. And what salt is, what does our blood consist of? I thought about this, you know, a while. I'm like, our blood consists of a lot of sodium, a lot of salt. So we're shaving this off onto our food. We're eating titans over here.
Oh yeah, exactly. This is what the theory purports, and you know, it's amazing some of the things he's pointed out on his channel. It truly is, you know, and it's kind of, you look at these odd rock formations everywhere, and he's saying things like a giant that had gallstones, for example, like, even though the rest of the meat is rotted away, the gallstones can still be found, and it's showing these rocks that look identical to a human gallstone but massive. And it's kind of the full. And he's saying we're looking at basically just pieces of human, well, giant body pieces, and the innards and the veins and the muscle tendons and all this type of stuff just everywhere. And it's kind of, it's rock now, but it petrified. It once was flesh, and he goes to show the science that it doesn't take long to petrify flesh. You can do it yourself.
Interesting.
You can do it yourself in your own time frame. It's not a long process. It's actually very quick if you want it to be. It just requires specific conditions involving mud floods, a flood, you know, and being buried and compressed for so long, and other things like that in certain conditions.
Yeah,
it's impressive.
There's a story I heard about. I think it was a lumber company, and they were chopping down trees, and obviously you can date a tree back to when it started to grow. And so they're cutting down these trees, and they find an animal petrified inside of one of these trees. And when you take the date of the tree, I think it was something like 100 and something years old or something like that. You know, the whole concept that the mainstream narrative kind of pushes is that, you know, in order for something to be petrified, it's got to be there, you know, I think
millions and millions of years.
Yeah, millions of years. And so it just doesn't make any sense when you have a story like that. And it made, like, you know, bulletin news. It was a really big story, but really interesting stuff, man.
Yeah, so like, but the point was, you know, when the giants had those wars and killed each other, these were titans creating the landscapes we know today and the land we know today. Trees were being chopped down in preparation for the coming flood, and even trees petrify and turn to stone when you cut them down. There is a petrified forest on the earth as well you can go and find. And it's funny because you talk about the age of trees, and yeah, you know, you can do dendrochronology and look at the tree rings and such, but you're going to be extremely hard pressed to find a tree that's over 200 years old. So that's odd in its own right.
Right.
And there are trees that are thousands of years old, as they say, but they're like national marked treasures, and there's like 20 of them on the earth or something like that.
It's funny.
That's not enough. That's not enough trees. That's not enough, you know.
Right.
I just saw a picture. There's one tree in Africa that looks like it was cut down, and then you know how when you like cut a branch off a tree and all these little branches sprout out of it?
Yeah.
It looks like this tree it's still living today, I believe. It looks like this tree was cut down, and then all these little branches. So it's a very odd looking stubby tree with little skinny branches at the top. And it's in Africa, and I forgot. It's called a Balboa tree or something like that.
Balboa tree. Yeah.
Yeah, it's odd. I mean, if that's a tree, it's a tree, but it just looks like it's a tree that was cut down and then it started to grow again. That's really what it looks like. And it's massive too.
They hold a lot of water, those trees. I've seen a few myself. Yeah, well, the thing, I think there are odd shapes. There are big. We have cedars, for example, today on the the Pacific Northwest, and it's kind of, they are impressive. They're huge. Right. The redwood forests, and we have big trees, old trees today, but not enough. When you think of how old the Earth is supposed to be, we should have hundreds of millions of them. One forest alone can have hundreds of thousands of trees. Where are these enormous giant trees that should should exist and just keep growing and growing and growing. Well, we have like a few. We have a handful. You can count them on your hands. You know what I mean? It's not enough.
Right.
But people say like, well, we do have a tree that's like 2,000 years old in the Middle East and this type of stuff. It's called Methuselah. You're wrong. It's like, have you looked at it? It's a husk of a tree.
Yeah.
It's dead. You could barely call it a tree anymore. It's clinging on for dear life if it has any life in it at all. It's a grey, horrible, decaying, rotting mess. And they're even trying to claim that stumps are old trees as well. It's like, well, if the tree's not there anymore, it doesn't count. It's kind of, where are they? And they're not actually there when you look into them. And they've been turned into like national monuments if they do exist.
National monuments. The
and
Devil's Tower.
You can't really go to them. You're not allowed. They're off limits to people, and it's kind of, there aren't enough old trees around to fit the narrative they've told us, and it's because there's been destructive events that have happened which have reset the earth quite a few times, and I'm not going to get into that today, but the flood was one of them. Let's just put it that way. The flood was one of them, and I think the giant tree stumps are remnants from this antediluvian age, which, to get to the point of the question, I think was an extremely trippy psychedelic time to be alive, a terrifying time to be alive. Thank God I wasn't born in that time, because things got really bad. Bad enough that God needed to send a flood. So it's not, some cruel, vindictive, evil, oppressive God who wants to just punish people for existing. It was not a good time. It was a terrible time. It was, for everybody involved, it was utterly corrupted beyond recognition. It was brutal. It was bloody. It was gory. It was a time of agony and corruption beyond all comprehension. And God had to send a flood as a mercy to give humanity a chance to survive. And thank God he did do that, because here we are today,
Yeah, it's funny. We wake up in the morning today and we turn the coffee pot on, we brew a nice cup in the morning, and we maybe open a newspaper or go on our phone and watch a video before going into work. What do you think it was like for the normal person, the normal man at that time, to like wake up in the morning and start their day?
Well, I wrote about that in the book. I guess you're referencing that paragraph I wrote. Shall I read it?
Yeah, go ahead.
Read that part.
Read it. It's great because I love it.
Yeah, I tried to add some levity and humour to the whole thing while I was at it, but chapter 7, Utter Corruption, I think it was, page 50. And this is just, I'm having fun here, just trying to imagine what it would be like. And yeah, it's not nice. So imagine a world in which you woke up every night to the sound of screaming and yelling just outside your door as another person gets robbed, stabbed, bludgeoned, flayed, or raped. You don't wake up in shock or disgust, just anger towards the inconsiderate people making too much noise while being defiled. Every morning you pray to your many idols for strength and fortune before venturing out into the world, fully armed and ready to defend your life or take a life at a moment's notice. You pass the day stealing food and scavenging the ruins around you for anything valuable before relaxing with a strong drink in the house you've taken from the now murdered tenants. Pillaging your neighbours' belongings and raping their daughters is thirsty work. You spend the night sharpening your blades while staring at the mutilated corpse of a toddler you tortured for its adrenaline-filled blood. That stuff's worth a fortune. You laugh at wooden splints and bandages wrapped around its skull. You consider it a pathetic attempt to make the child's skull look longer. It would never have looked like the king's skull, no matter how hard they tried. Fashion fads like these come and go, you suppose. Tomorrow you plan on hunting in the woods for a large animal to offer as a tribute to the local giant god king. It's always a good idea to stay on their good side, if you can call it that. He needs his blood offering to drink after all. You don't want him getting hungry and eating all the firstborns of the village again. The loss of child labour, sex slaves and adrenochrome really upset the village elders of the Serpent Guild last time that happened. Hopefully some deer are still left, and if they haven't been torn to shreds by that half-lion, half-serpent eagle thing prowling around the roads and caves nearby. The gods and their manservants have been creating a lot of new and terrifying creatures lately. They went a little crazy after all the vast giants started killing each other, and with all these impossible-to-move giant bodies decaying away amid the people, the place is beginning to stink. With the titans gone and the monsters everywhere, everyone is lining up to get their powers from the gods to protect themselves. You've heard legends of a snake lady so terrifying that she can turn cowards into stone with just a glance. Nothing freezes you with fear anymore. Perhaps they're coming from that island in the middle of that big cold ocean you've heard so much about. The one with all the tall, pale people everyone calls Atlanteans. You try to sail there, but you keep hearing tales of men sailing off and never returning. Suddenly, you're reminded of the rumours of some guy building a massive boat in preparation for an endless reign. He keeps telling people they are evil for getting these powers, but how can it be wrong to want to survive? Who knows? If you're lucky, you might be able to capture and force one of the tiny folks with wings by the forest lake to share their secrets on how to gain the gods' favour. If you don't get tricked into believing one of their vile mind illusions and get eaten first. You need an upgrade only the gods can provide. Your pathetic body given to you by the evil creator is too weak to compete with these terrors for survival. Perhaps you will ask for the birds of a wing to fly, or horse's legs for more speed. Maybe the chitin of a beetle or the scales of a dragon for impenetrable skin. The head of a dog would be fantastic for the fangs and powerful bite too. No one would dare approach you then. Perhaps the oracles can get you in touch with the gods directly for the strength of a bull. You already know who you will abduct and offer as a sacrificial blood tribute upon the stone altar. F. Steve. Anyway, full stop there.
No, dude, when I read that in your book, I immediately thought of the film Hellboy, and I was like put into that universe. I don't know if you've seen the newest Hellboy movie, but there's a reference to giants in it, and they're eating people, and you've got all these like demonic half hybrid whatever animals running around, and at the end of the movie there's like an apocalypse scene where you've got the return of these titans, these giants, and they're doing nothing but just just reaping havoc and violence and evil and death. It's terrible.
I think I saw a clip of that on like Instagram or something, like a short, that scene where they start appearing in the city and stuff. But obviously, naturally, like any true Gnostic modern satanic media, the good guy is the devil, or the son of the devil, or whatever the hell it is. It's
just so funny how pop culture kind of gives us tidbits of everything. Right. You look at Moana, where the mother of she's the island. It's alive. It's a being, a human being is actually the island. You look at just about any sci-fi movie. It gives you little tidbits of a lot of this biblical Nephilim talk. It's very fascinating, man. And Avatar, like you brought up earlier, they cut the tree down.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, absolutely. It's all the time, And obviously with this clown, we haven't even really talked about the clowns yet because we're just laying a foundation here. Maybe we need to do a part 2 where we can expand upon this more.
Absolutely.
I know our time is short, but what I've explained to you there is basically like the first 10 chapters of the book. It's laying the biblical foundation for where the Nephilim came from. And then we also discuss in chapters, I think it's 10 and 9, the descriptions we have from Scripture that explain the way these things looked. How did the angels look? How did Cain look? And how did the Nephilim look from a biblical standpoint? And then we get into non-biblical descriptions in the rest of the world in the next book later on. But it's all kind of laying the foundation. And I think we've kind of done that today. If people haven't heard that story before of the Nephilim creation, I think I've given you a good all-rounder description of many theories kind of slapped together into what we holistically think the image was now. And again, my work is based off the work of giants who came before me. We've got Gary Wayne, Michael Heiser, Rob Skeever, people who are big names in the conspiracy Christian world, and they're the ones who really inspired me to go out there and retell the story as best I could. Right. But from there, my theory about the clowns is the second half of the book, from chapters 11 to 20. I really go into the history of the costume of a clown, and I don't really know how much of that I can explain fully to you now in 15 minutes, but I'll leave it to you to ask any questions you've got now.
Yeah, man. So thank you. I appreciate you, laying down that foundational work, and we'll work on in the future getting you on for a part 2, absolutely, because I think the best is yet to come. But real quick, let's get into some Little Season talk. I don't know how big this concept is. I'm new to it, and I'm willing to just get some further information. Sure. I saw recently that your I think it might be your latest video. It was about the Trump inauguration and that whole ordeal. I guess we can get into that kind of talk if you just might just kind of open that up for us.
Sure. So I am the guy who's known predominantly originally for this Nephilim clown stuff. I spent 8 years of my life dedicated to it, and like I said, I'm writing the second book on this. And I feel like I've kind of boxed off the work in video format on the Nephilim clowns. I don't think there's much more I can say anymore without repeating myself to no end. So I'm writing the book to finalize the work, and box it off. So that's there as a compendium in black and white for people to go and reference when they need to get that information. And I've kind of pivoted my channel since October last year to also focusing on this new and rising topic, which is, I don't know what to call it specifically. We have many names, but it's basically the little season theory is one name for it, or the millennial kingdom has already come theory. And it's a big one. It's very controversial. It really messes with people's minds, but it's not going away. And I am extremely compelled to discuss it because that's just who I am. I'm just that type of guy. When something captures my imagination like this, I roll with it. I mean, I wrote a book about clowns, for God's sake. Yeah, that's what I am. That's what I do, but this has got me, and I can't shut up about it because it's just answers everything. Like I said, I've been in this game for over a decade and a half. I've been trying to figure out the truth, and this seems to be answering a lot of questions to why we have a conspiracy that we need to understand. This is like the glue that ties it all together. It explains why we have each individual topic within the conspiracy culture, why the evil controls are doing what they're doing. This seems to be it. And it's not that we're waiting for Christ to return anymore. It's not that we're living through tribulation and all these things are happening because that's just how it was supposed to be during tribulation. It's that we're living in a time after tribulation. 1,000 years after tribulation, in fact. After a millennial reign of Christ, which was on earth, which has been hidden from us. And we are now in a time called the little season, which is referenced in Revelation 20. And it says, after the 1,000 years has ended, Satan will be released from his prison, and he will go out and deceive all the nations. And he will gather an army whose number is of the sands of the sea, Gog and Magog, and march up the breadth of the earth and surround the camp of saints and make war with the beloved city. And then fire comes down from heaven, and then its final great white throne judgment, New Jerusalem descends from heaven, and a new heaven and earth is established. A lot of people think that's a future event way off from now that we don't have to worry about. This theory purports that we're living through it right now. We're in the midst of it, perhaps the end of it, in fact. And we're not waiting for Christ to return and establish his millennial reign. It already happened in what we call, chronologically speaking, roughly 70 AD. So that's it in a nutshell. But
gotcha. So
it's complicated, and there's a lot of nuance and facets.
And you know
what?
Yeah. We could set up a show too in the future just to kind of cover that whole concept, because I'm sure that's a probably hour and a half whole idea.
And then some. Yeah.
You mean a year and a half?
A year and a half.
Something like that, yeah.
So Trump is our president now. What are your thoughts on where we're at today? What's going on?
Yeah, so you're referencing a video I just made on Tuesday, which it's just I do a morning rant on Tuesdays because I do a bit of work on that morning and have some time spare after writing. And I was just thought, well, the current thing right now is Trump just got inaugurated, and a lot of odd things are happening surrounding that. He reinstated TikTok for the masses, and I was humoring that my wife predicted this would happen. She said, I bet Trump will bring it back to get the youth on his side. And it happened exactly as she said it would happen, like 3 days later. And I was like, wow, that happened faster than I thought it would happen, And then she even predicted that it's to do with Facebook and making a deal with Meta or something like that as a buyout for TikTok and to conglomerate or merge the technologies together. And I think that's in the talks now as well, from what I've just heard today.
Yeah, it's with the Stargate.
Something deal. Like I don't know what's going on. She knows more than me, clearly, but throughout all of that,
like my wife. That's so funny, dude.
Yeah, throughout all of that, I'm kind of trying to tie it into where we're at in time, with it being the little season. How many people think like Trump may be an antichrist figure? If Christians aren't comparing him for some reason to like a Cyrus resurrected of some kind, or who's for the people, but if it's not that, then they're trying to fake an antichrist-like figure to usher in the end times. So he suffered a head wound where his ear got clipped, remember that? And it's kind of, they're always doing stuff like that to keep Christians locked into the futurist doctrine, where it's kind of like, see, it's a sign of the tribulations. He's the beast who got the head wound and survived. And it's kind of, well, they're always going to keep doing stuff like that in the media to keep you thinking that you're in that time. So it's kind of Barack Obama's car being called the Beast, for example, was to wind people up to make them think that he is the Beast. So, it's kind of they're always going to do that in the media to keep you locked into the wrong time.
The narrative is always being controlled, man. It's such a stage.
So I was saying it's Masonic theater. Like he's not your friend. Like he's a part of the agenda. He's a part of the plan. So where does he fit into the Little Caesar narrative? And it seems like he is basically just another patsy helping create a world to give you something worth fighting for. So there's a war coming in the Gog and Magog narrative at the end of time. Okay, and he needs to convince you to make war with the camp of saints. Now, you're not going to know that you're making war with Jesus and his resurrected saints from the millennial reign. I mean, he deceives all the nations. That's what Satan does. You'll be deceived. You're going to be lied to about what you're going to make war with. And I think Trump is preparing people to... It's like a pendulum swing away from the ultra-liberal left-wing oppression to ultra-conservative Christendom. And it's going to seem like prosperity and growth and peace and security is going to be upon us over the next maybe 5 years, 10 years. Who knows, maybe it'll become the dictatorship so many people fear, but it'll be a good one where everything's getting better and better and better and perfect.
Supposedly, he just today announced that he was going to completely eliminate the federal income tax.
Perfection. No debts.
Exactly what you're saying.
Freedom, security, no more debts. Have your steak and eat the whole cow while you're at it, as I said. You know what I mean? It's no longer eat the bugs and be happy and shut up. It's going to be the other thing, But that was the point. You were supposed to be in fear of these ridiculous threats from the left that were coming upon us, and Trump's going to save you from it and let you have the opposite, and that's going to give you that false sense of security. And it's kind of he's Masonic theater. He's the dark to the white. He's the black square to the white square. He's the other left wing. He's the right wing to the left wing of the same bird. It's all just a show, to keep us locked into the narrative. Now it's playing out. They're going to try and play out like some kind of tribulation event in the future. I don't know. It's hard to say exactly how I'm going to play that out, but I do think his talks about suddenly wanting to annex Canada and Greenland is a hint towards this little season theory. Because the little season theory purports that the camp of saints is in the North Pole. It's there. That's exactly where Mount Zion is, New Jerusalem, as it was during the millennial reign. Maybe not the heavenly Jerusalem that descends from heaven, but like a earthly mirrored version, some kind of beloved city, shall we say. That's kind of like the one in heaven, but an earth version. I think where perhaps the saints or Christ may have ruled with an iron rod for 1,000 years after he first came back in 70 AD, after the destruction of the temple, and after Armageddon and after tribulation. So it seems like they're still there. They never left the earth. They're just kind of not on the maps anymore, and no cameras pointing at them, and no shipping routes will go past them, and no flight will go near their path. So you just don't know they're there, and you just believe the North Pole is an ever-moving ice sheet that's uninhabitable. Why even bother? It's not important, But if they're going to surround the camp of saints, which will be in the north, then it makes sense to build bases closer to it, like on the northern coasts of Canada and Greenland. And I'm sure Russia may be doing the same thing in Siberia as well.
Interesting.
So it does kind of make sense with the Little Caesar narrative why he would even joke or talk about those type of things. But I think we're going to see Trump give people a life worth protecting. People are going to become proud of their nation, of their world, of their stuff, because it's going to be a prosperous time. And I think there's going to be the Project Blue Beam fake alien invasion thing is going to kick off sooner or later. And that's going to convince all of humanity to come together as one. So this is your new world order, all one religion, all one belief system, all one currency, all one country, all one leader type of world, no borders, because it all seems petty and insignificant when faced with an outside alien threat to have such stupid differences between humanity. Why don't we all just combine to become humanity rather than separated countries, And I think that's going to start kicking off. But all of that really is in preparation for the discovery of an odd alien civilization in the north, perhaps a mothership floating in space or something in the north, which may be a floating city called New Jerusalem from a biblical perspective, but from our brainwashed perspective, we can only interpret it as aliens from space, because that's what the programming has been for the past 100 years. If something's flying in the sky that's the size of a continent, it must be a mothership from space. What else could it possibly be from our brainwashed, stupid Hollywoodized perspective, And
right.
If suddenly Jesus becomes visible with his saints, but it looks like a giant floating city, people are going to be like, we're under attack by aliens. And no doubt they will release the UFOs they built in underground bases. They will release the Nephilim chimera horde they've been growing in labs. They will release all the horrible projections in the sky. And they will make it seem like we're being under attack by aliens. But really, that mothership, air quotes, had nothing to do with that attack. That was the controllers playing it out as though we're under attack from the mothership.
Right, and I
then,
think too that sorry.
Go ahead.
So I think this plays into Hollywood, and why they have created, especially the Avengers, how the narrative with Thanos, right? So I don't know if you're familiar with it, the movie Avengers, but I think it was the Avengers movie that Thanos first appeared in, and so the way the movie starts off is that Thanos is on his ship, which is called, I believe, Sanctuary.
Yeah.
And so he's on his way to Earth. And the way Hollywood likes to twist and manipulate and deceive is by, I could see what they're doing to our subconscious in a way to where Thanos is representing Christ in New Jerusalem, but to the normal man, they're seeing it as that Thanos is a bad guy. You see where I'm kind of going with this, where the Avengers are the good guys, but those could be like the Nephilim or the supposed false Christ. And I mean, that might not line up with the whole little season thing, but
well, no, it does.
To it.
It does,
oh, yeah,
actually,
sure.
Because like I said, yeah, Hollywood's always positioned the evil invading alien has come to change our way of life. We need to defend ourselves against it, that type of thing. Well, Christ does come to destroy the earth and make it new again. He does come to end our way of life and create it as it should be, because we are living in a corrupted way of life run by Satan himself right now with horrible, horrible aspirations and goals. He's coming to change all of that. So yeah, that threat is always in the movies. This thing coming to make it their way rather than our way. And the Avengers are superhumans, so hybridized humans who have genetically changed themselves to become something else. They've corrupted their image of God to become human plus or something else. So just like before the flood, it's the same thing. It's humans messing with their DNA to be better than human because what God created wasn't good enough for them. So no doubt we're going to see a replaying of that in the end times. No, absolutely. I think we probably are, actually. And because there'll be an alien invasion that will win, will push back the first one. Okay, and no doubt intergalactic aliens who are good will save us or something, which are just fallen angels posing as aliens, will push back the first wave, and it's kind of, we've come to save humanity from the evil invading Zerg from the Zeta Reticuli, something or other, which whatever they'll call the giant mothership they see in the sky now, And it says, this thing has been traveling from planet to planet, destroying universes, and we've come to save you. We seeded your planet millions of years ago, and we've come to protect you as our children. Right. But you're not ready yet. You're not strong enough to face the enemy. So you need to genetically upgrade yourself and take this thing we're offering you to become like us. It's time to take control of your own evolution, humanity, right, and become the gods you were meant to be like we are. And once you do this, you'll be well prepared and ready to fight back against the next wave, and we'll take the fight to them. And that's basically, Satan has just convinced the whole earth to gather together as an army to go march up the breadth of the earth and make war with the camp of saints.
Yeah,
that's Revelation. That's Revelation 20 fulfilled there.
Right, that's Armageddon.
There's a lot of talk right now. A lot of people are on Palladian. I see Palladian everywhere.
Star seeds and Palladian.
Exactly.
Yeah.
A lot of Palladian. It very, very interesting. It all ties together. What you guys are saying makes a ton of sense. A deception. Yeah. A great. It's all deceiving. I truly believe that.
But we need to get out of this idea that we're waiting for tribulation to come upon us, because that's not how it's going to play out. And a lot of people are going to lose their faith when the tribulation playbook doesn't go the way tribulation said it was going to go.
Right.
Interesting.
You know what I mean? And people say to me, you're leading people astray. They're going to take the mark of the beast, all this sort of stuff, because you're telling them it's already come. I'm like, well, first of all, no, we're not idiots all of a sudden. I'm not going to take anything akin to a mark of the beast suddenly, just because I believe where we are in time is different from where the futurists believe it is. Like, why? I'm not an idiot. Like, why would I suddenly do that? That's not a good. It's always a bad idea to take something that you can't buy or sell without it. Just don't do it. But I don't feel like what I'm preaching here is going to make people lose their faith when they understand it. I think it's bringing more people to faith. And I think when tribulation doesn't play out as Revelation says it does, more Christians are going to lose their faith than with my belief, because I never expected tribulation to play out the way the playbook says it was, because I believe it already happened in the first millennium, you know. So it's kind of, I feel like we're in a safer position from here, and I think we're better equipped to understand what's coming next as well, because put it this way, there's not going to be a rapture, which is a false doctrine anyway, but it's not going to happen as people believe it's going to be. But I do believe they're going to fake a lot of these things. They're going to make it seem like there's earthquakes in diverse places and wars and rumors of wars and pestilence and famine and earthquakes, you know, and volcanoes going off everywhere. And they're going to release some kind of weird hybrid locust horde or something like. They're going to do some weird stuff, you know. But they have the technology to do these things. They have the power to make this happen. They can control the weather, you know. These people have enough money and resources and control to create the smoke and mirror Hollywood illusion that tribulation is coming upon us. And it's all to reveal Jesus, right? Well, what's going to turn up isn't going to really be Jesus. Sure, they'll play out some kind of man of sin situation, make it, you know, proclaiming to be God in the new temple they're building currently in Jerusalem. They'll play, which by the way is ridiculous. So you're building a temple to let the Antichrist go in there. Do you understand how stupid that sounds? How about the temple that was around before 70 AD? That was good enough, wasn't it? Is it possible it already happened then? And then the temple was destroyed. You know, maybe that's what happened instead. But it's kind of people are expecting it all to happen now in their time, and stuff like that will be played out. But it's a huge show, and they're using tribulation as a script, and they're going to make it seem like that's happened. And then what happens after that? Armageddon, giant war, and then Christ comes.
It's so funny what you just said. It's like a script, and you're right, because again, I always revert back to like Hollywood movies, and I think it's important too, because I kind of think they do put things in front of you purposely, and share their narrative or their agenda or whatever it be. But in one of the Resident Evil movies, this was like a flashback, or not flashback, but a flash forward before the virus was released, and there's these elites, and they're all in this big Oval Office in the corporation, and they're talking about global warming. They're talking about all these catastrophes that man has started to cause, and all this stuff. And so the guy who's in charge of it all, he's like the evil one. He slides a Bible forward on the table, and he goes, "It's all in here. What's coming?" And he goes, "But we're going to do it on our own cause. Like we're going to take control of it and do it under our own will." And so in a way, he's kind of saying, yes, we're going to cause all of these things to look like the end of the world is coming. That is a part of prophecy, but they're in control of all of it behind the scenes. It's kind of a wild take.
Well, they do have to tell you in the media kind of what they're doing, and you'll find once you incorporate this idea into your brain and fully soak in what it actually is and how it works, you'll realize it makes sense of a lot of things. Not just a lot of conspiracies and why conspiracies exist, but you also see in the media, they've been telling you this for a long, long, long time. And people have been twisting themselves into pretzels to try and somehow make the words of Jesus mean he was coming back in 2,000 years, when he was very clear to the people around him. He's coming back in their time. And you can speculate to the ends of the earth, like the Tartarian Empire theorists are just misinterpreting the millennial reign of Christ. That was the ancient advanced civilization time that we're missing. It was when the saints ruled for 1,000 years with Christ with an iron rod, you know. And it's kind of, you can point to the buildings, you can point to the architecture, you can point to all these crazy historical corruptions here and there, or the media or whatever, but fundamentally this theory isn't based on any of that. It's based on the words of Jesus Christ himself. He repeatedly told the people in his time who were around him he was coming back in their lifetime. So I believe him, and that's all I can work backwards from. And you don't need anything else to back up this idea and this concept. In fact, you find futurist eschatology, which places everything as a future event, and the 70th week idea that we're living in the church age and Daniel's 70th week is a 2,000-year period is kind of, it falls short when under any real scrutiny when you actually read the book with audience relevancy. Who was he talking to in that time? Okay, and as soon as you start interpreting the Bible that way, rather than trying to interpret it in a way where it's like, he was talking to those people through them to get the message to me now behind my MacBook Pro. You know what I mean? It's kind of like we're using iPhones while watching TV. Like, it has nothing to do with us. He was speaking to the people in that generation of his time. Okay? And he was telling them, those who pierce me will see me coming in the clouds. Caiaphas, you will see me return with my kingdom and glory coming in the clouds. It's kind of like, some of you standing here right now will not taste death before you see me coming in the clouds with my kingdom. It's kind of, he was repeatedly saying over and over and over again, you all here right now will reign with me for 1,000 years.
What scripture was that?
I've got a large document listing them all out. In fact, I've got a book.
It's Revelations, right?
I've got a book here laying out all the quotes, biblically speaking, that explain everything. People are on this now. Like, I'm not the only one. Like, this has just sold 600 copies since I read it on my channel. Like, the guy's been telling me, because there are hundreds of verses in the Bible make it very clear futurist eschatology fails miserably when held up to biblical scrutiny. It's all happened. Most of Revelation has been fulfilled already. We are living in Revelation 20. This is the little season of Satan. This is not pre-tribulation, pre-apocalypse stuff. Like, and it's hard to take in. I know it's hard to swallow. It goes against everything you've been taught through the mainstream indoctrination of church. But we're conspiracy theorists at the end of the day, you know what I mean?
Sure.
So
well,
you have to be open to this. Yeah,
exactly. I was just about, you took the words right out of my mouth. You got to kind of be open to these concepts because really the big thing too about being a conspiracy person is that we don't like deception and we want to kind of be in front of it rather than behind it, if that makes any sense.
Right.
But
I think the theorist part of it is the most important because it's all based off of factual evidence. I think that's the most important part of this. Everybody thinks that people like this are quacks, but it's all well researched based off of factual evidence.
There's been people who have tried to debunk us. You know, there's been big end times ministries type channels who have been preaching that Christ is about to return any moment, looking for the signs of the times. Everything is a sign of the times, no matter what it is in the news. You know, a lot of fear porn stuff always being pumped out. Those type of big channels have tried to debunk us, and they've failed every time. They can't debunk us. All they can do is ridicule us, call us names, and tell us that we're just deceivers out there to try and lead people astray without actually addressing any of the points we make or addressing the scriptures while they're at it. And the scriptures they do try and use to discredit us, they're adding their own interpretation on top of it that does not bear any relevance to what's actually being said in the scripture. Like, this generation doesn't mean the generation he was talking to. It meant a future generation from now. It meant the generation that will live through this stuff. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like, okay, so you have that one minor reinterpretation of that one verse. What about the other 50 I just told you? And they don't want to deal with it. They ignore it, you know, because sadly, it's become big industry to preach tribulation doctrine, and we're affecting the bottom line. That truly is what's going on, and it's sad to say that. You know, I'm sure they are still on fire for Christ in many ways, and I'm not saying that salvation is at stake necessarily, but I do think mammon has got the best of a lot of people when it comes to this kind of type of stuff, and a lot of people as well. Pride is an issue. They don't want to lose face because they've been preaching such a doctrine for so long that they've invested their personality into it. So it's hard to go against it, you know. And I'll put my hands up and say, you know, if someone can give me legitimate reasons to not believe this theory, then yeah, I'll change my mind because I'm looking for the truth at the end of the day. But no one has give me any satisfactory answer to contradict anything yet. They haven't, and they'll say they have, but they really haven't. Like, they've not even come close. And I'm expecting the next people who are going to try are going to be the theologians and the academics. But I'm just going to point them straight back to the words of Jesus Christ. You claim to be Christian. Do you believe Jesus when he said these things or not? That's all I'm going to fall back on. But I can't, you know, that's it. Because I'm not a theologian or a PhD.
Like a Wes Huff, you're talking about, like a Wes Huff?
Something like that's coming down the way. They're going to be the next ones they're going to do this.
Interesting.
Sure. I can see. I'm feeling it.
Maybe that was purposeful.
You know?
purposeful
Maybe.
to push him out because we see him come out and he is strictly an academic and a theologian, right? He's not, he's not a Gen 6 kind of conspiratorial guy.
No.
And I always wonder, I'm wondering when he's going to step out of his realm and jump into ours. I'm curious if it's ever going to happen.
Look, I appreciate what Wes did about the Billy Carson thing, because I think Billy Carson is a snake oil salesman. I've been saying it for years. He just makes stuff up with confidence and has convinced thousands of people to follow the New Age doctrine, which I abhor. I hate it, So I'm on board with Wes, and thank you. He exposed Billy's easy to expose nonsense with a G in front, But at the same time, he's not one of us. He's not a conspiracy theorist Christian. He's an academic theologian. And me reinterpreting history and saying the Middle Ages was not the Dark Ages, but in fact a time of advancement in the millennial reign of Christ, that's not going to fly. I'm sorry. With the people who are following the academic mainstream timeline of history, we are lunatics. But I believe Jesus. And I don't believe what man has told me about history. But I'm going to believe the words of Jesus Christ. So,
man, that would be a great debate with Wes Huff because he really seems dialed in on Scripture.
Oh yeah, he's going to demolish me with all the facts and the Scripture and the theology and the history and the man-made understandings and interpretations. I'm not going to be able to win that argument. I'm not.
Yeah, but you have an argument of Jesus said specifically this. Jesus said
well,
this.
Yeah, exactly.
He was going to be back while he's alive. What do you think about that, Wes?
Well, it would force him to say, "Oh, well, Jesus was wrong," and that's the problem, isn't it? How else is he going to be able to? Even C.S. Lewis, a very well-respected academic type Christian throughout history, he's quoted as saying it's a great embarrassment of Christianity, the biggest embarrassment, in fact, that all the apostles believed that Christ was going to return in their lifetime, and they had good reason to. The Master told them so. But but he didn't. And it turns out that even Jesus Christ knew no more about the affairs of the end and how it was going to go down than any other man. And he was wrong. It's kind of like, are you serious? Like, you can call yourself a Christian and at the same time say he was wrong. Is it possible we've been lied to? And he was right, and he told the truth. Could it just be that,
Right.
That's the way I'm going to do it.
I saw a couple paintings not too long ago, and I don't know their origin or how original they are, but you see Jesus standing in front of like a small council, and there's these massive pillars that look like Roman pillars behind him, and it just reminds me of the Tartarian theory, and I'm like, that looks kind of funny. Did he come back and do his thing and have a millennial reign?
Again, me and Joe from JT Follows JC we're kind of teamed up on all of this for a while now, and there's many others in the community. It's a growing big community of little seasoners, if you want to call us anything. It's new, it's fresh. We're all working together, but we've become a tour de force. We are truly combined together. We're getting the answers to explain a lot of things, but the history. So what was the mark of the beast? Who were the two witnesses? These pressing questions, we're looking for the answers and we're finding them. Or at least
That's
hints.
Exactly. Me and Stevie had a conversation, like a 20-minute conversation over the phone the other day. We're like, okay, so, we're keeping an open mind. Because, of course, just like any other Christian, you're led to believe that you're leading towards tribulation. We're like, so what would have been the mark of the beast back then? And that is my main question, because we look at Elon Musk, we look at Neuralink, we look at what just happened with the virus that came out in 2019 and how they tried to get everybody to do this and that in order. If you didn't have this, you can't buy or sell.
But I thought the mark of the beast was barcodes. Oh, sorry, wasn't it chip and pin? Oh, I thought it was an RFID chip that went in your hand.
Well, I thought
it was transhumanism. I thought it was black goo. Oh,
exactly.
You tell me now it's a vaccine. Oh, wait, no, it's going to be what? It's going to be Neuralink. What is it? It's there's always going to be a new mark of the beast, because that's the point.
Right. No, I get what you're saying, and it is. There's just so much similarity and confusion, really, but so much similarity. You go into Whole Foods. We talk about this a lot, where you have a little chip in your hand that's linked to your bank account. You can buy your groceries at Whole Foods. I don't know how it is in the UK, but do you have Whole Foods in the UK?
We have our own versions of things like that.
Do you guys have anything like that where you can scan your wrist with a chip in it that's linked to your bank account?
In London, they're trialing stuff like that in big cities, yeah.
Okay.
Not necessarily a chip in your hand, but you can just scan an app on your phone, and then that's it. You can go and do what you want.
So in the United States, in every Whole Foods, there's a scanner right next to the checkout, the self checkout, and maybe even at the whatever the other checkout. There's a scanner that's for your wrist. It's for your hand. There's people that actually have this, which is, again, it's just like it really like makes you think, you know.
Oh yeah, they're definitely going to play out like a digital currency situation, and which would be like a Mark of the Beast situation, that we can just turn off your money whenever we want to. You can't buy or sell unless you capitulate to our system. It's a spiritual mark, you know, it's in the forehead and the hand, therefore your actions and your thoughts are the mark of the beast. And there's always many ways to interpret it, and I think there is a fractal nature to biblical eschatology where things will repeat themselves and there's nothing new under the sun in a true ecclesiastical style. So don't get me wrong, you know, I think there will be many mark of the beasts around, but if you want to go back in time to Revelation and a specific prophecy, there's a thing called a libellus, which was around the same time, in which Christians of that time were forced to sacrifice to gods of the Roman pagan pantheon with witnesses from Roman officials in order to get a piece of paper which would allow them to buy or sell within Rome. That's a mark of the beast, you know. So there are plenty of examples of things akin to marks of the beast. I mean, the word is charagma, if you want to get into the Greek, which basically means, it could mean money. It can mean a coin or a stamp or a press within something, or a relief within something, or a seal or a mark, which can be the mark, which was the money of Rome, which had the seal of Nero on it in that time, you know, which he was the worst possible murderer of Christians around at that time you could understand. And I don't think Revelation was written after the destruction of the temple. I think it was written around 66 AD, 60 AD, just before the destruction of the temple came upon it and just before the Roman-Jewish war kicked off. So again, if we look historically speaking, we can find that most of what's predicted in Revelation can apply to the first millennium and the first century, but the timeline's been stretched out. So me and JT have done a lot of research into this off the back of other non-Christian researchers and archaeologists. We can find there's plenty of evidence through the strata that 700 years of the first millennium doesn't even exist. So we're not even living in 2024. We're more likely living right now in the year 1350 or something like that, because those 700 years aren't there. And we call them the Dark Ages because we have no history for it. But is it more likely that there is no history, and the archaeological evidence proves there's nothing there? There's just Rome, a destruction event, and then monasteries. There's 3 layers.
Right.
Like, it's kind of what buried all of Rome, what caused the complete destruction of the Roman Empire in that time. The only thing that comes close to it could be a tribulation-style event, and we have evidences spread out through those 700 years of massive cataclysmic events happening. In the first century, in the middle antiquity, in late antiquity, 500s and the 900s, there's these massive cataclysmic volcanic eruptions, earthquake events with pestilence and death and misery and pain and famines and the sun going dark, but they've spread them out as 3 separate events over 700 years. It's more likely it was just one enormous destructive event that happened in the first century. And again, we're gathering the evidence now. It happened. It did happen. It's just not as the timeline historically given to us by the Scaliger brothers and the Jesuits has told us. It's a lie. The chronology is off. You know, it's way off. And we're piecing together a new chronology to try and piece it together and find out where we actually are. But as far as I'm concerned, we are living in the little season of Satan post a millennial reign where the devil was locked up for 1,000 years. I'm there, you know. And it took me a while to get there, but the evidence just keeps piling up. It's piling higher and higher and higher. And I believe God would reveal the truth to his people in the end times. And those with the ears to hear and the eyes to see would take the message on board, you know. I don't think he would leave us lost. I think he comes for his flock when it's time.
Sure. Right. It would be so cool, man, if we could host JT and you on the show. And because I feel that would just have a synergistic explosion of this topic.
Yeah.
I mean, the amount of work you guys have put into it. So we
do it all the time. Anyway, we're always teaming up together to do stuff like this. So if you want to, I'm happy to do it. But it's not just me. There's a lot of channels out there right now who do better work than I. I'm just a good guy at compiling it all and communicating the message, you know. But the real hardcore researchers out there, there are so many. You need to just get into the community and you'll find them all. We all talk to each other and we're all kind of growing together now. But Jason, Jack, Madeline of Leaving Babylon, Conspiracy R Us did a lot of great work on this in the beginning, and a channel called Exploring Tartaria, who's disappeared now. But her old videos summarize this quite brilliantly about 4 years ago.
Wait, she's disappeared?
She's one of the first people to really break the theory, yeah.
She's disappeared, like no one can find her?
Her channel's gone, her videos are gone. I think she might still have an Instagram, but luckily a lot of people saved all of her videos and re-uploaded them. So you can still see the videos she made. But I think she had a change of heart. I think she became a hardcore Catholic and then regretted making the videos or something like that. So I think it became like a whole...
Sure.
I think something like that happened. I'm not sure.
I don't know if I believe it.
But her logical conclusion...
They got her. The Jesuits got her.
It may be, but it would be a logical conclusion to become a Catholic if you believe that the saints reigned for 1,000 years during millennial reign. And the saint iconography we see throughout the Catholic Church was more likely a reference to them walking around with perfected light bodies during that time. And it's not that we worship the dead... Because when they were being venerated, they weren't dead. They were just people walking around who knew Christ and can get in touch with him for you. So it's a whole different situation then, you know what I mean, when you contextualize them. So I think she thinks that's the one true church, the Catholic Church, who was around during the millennial reign, and therefore she's joined it. But I think there's been corruption since then, and I don't think what we see today is the case.
I've always said that too to Stevie. The Catholic Church has been corrupted long, long ago. Okay, two things for you before we let you go. One, ridiculous question. It's a funny. Ronald McDonald's a clown. Do you eat McDonald's?
When I do go to McDonald's, I don't. I try and have like something else, like a chicken burger or even a salad, But I'm not buying that it's human meat necessarily.
Okay.
You can do strict tests here in the UK, and people have. I think it is beef. It's just low quality beef. I'll put it that way. America might be different though. I'm not gonna lie. I think America terrifies me.
The regulations here
are
are insane, but
it's changing supposedly. So
there are plenty of people who do tests on the meat here in the UK, and you watch videos. It seems like it is just low.
I'm gonna have to look that up. I've never seen that before. So that was a funny. And two, would you be willing to come on and debate a pre-trib or a trib guy? And get to the bottom of this.
Well, maybe not like specifically debate, because that I don't even know how to set that up, and I personally.
Oh, let's debate.
I just don't like debates.
No,
I like
it would digress into nonsense. I've seen it before.
Well, we gotta. Okay, first of all, we really gotta pick a guy that is not, a little, not. Well,
just someone. It would just be like a conversation if it was to happen, and it would stay that way.
It's really a debate.
I don't like the whole debate.
I wouldn't call myself a debater.
Stage.
I'm not trained to debate people. We don't have debate club here in the UK like you Americans do, or whatever it is. We don't learn that kind of thing.
I guess I really mean a conversation.
I would fail miserably at debating.
Not a formal debate. Not a formal debate. Just exactly like what Wes Huff and Billy Carson had. It was not a formal debate. We want to discuss and get to the bottom of certain theologies, certain ideologies in theology.
I think there are people better than me who could do that. I'm not against there being a debate on this topic. I don't know if I'm the guy. I really don't know if I'm the guy. I'm too nice. I'm not.
You're getting there, I guess.
Maybe.
I think you're there.
But I do think debates aren't necessarily what this theory calls for either. Look, I think we can make our case through our channels and our videos, and the evidence is there if people want to see it. But I think debating, the emotions would run too high with this. I think.
Yeah, so there's my point. I think we could find a guy. This is what I feel. I think we could find a guy that would not let his emotions get out of control and maybe have an open.
No,
mind.
you can't. No, you won't. No, you won't. I'm sorry.
Jesse. See, here's the thing. Jesse's new to this stuff. I mean, I'm not saying he's doesn't know what he's talking about or he's ignorant, but I agree with Paul, because it's going to get heated, and that's why I don't think it should be a debate at all. If anything, just a cordial conversation.
Debates are for entertainment purposes. They're not for the truth. That's what I discovered that a long time ago. I don't think debates are really for getting to the
I
bottom
like
of anything.
entertainment.
I think it's a bad idea.
Yeah.
I think it's a terrible idea.
I think it would cheapen. I think it would cheapen the whole thing if I went out there
Okay.
trying to own
All right.
people and win points and debates.
I'd
I'm
rather-
just, you know.
Yeah,
I'd
I'd
rather just
rather
talk
have
about it,
I'd
yeah.
rather have you
So-
on. We'll have you on for a 2-hour
and then have
session,
somebody
and
else
then
on.
Have someone
later.
else on.
Okay,
And
gotcha.
keep
That
it
makes sense.
separate.
Sorry,
because-
sorry, I even brought it up, guys.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Jesse, what are you doing?
It's okay.
Golly,
It's okay.
XG.
It's
Just
okay. It's fine.
Right.
I mean,
I am the
don't-
XG.
Don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong. Look, I've been thinking about these ideas, and it's not like I'm not flippantly saying no. I'm not going to debate somebody. I've seriously thought about it, and again, the conclusions I've come to, what I've tried to explain to you there, I think it's a bad idea, only because it's such a new concept. Relatively speaking, there's things like preterism, which has existed before since the 1600s. This isn't preterism. This is like something else. It's evolved from that with new evidences and a different angle and a different way of understanding it. And it
I
also
respect
comes,
that, man.
So,
I really do.
We're still trying to figure it out, and I don't feel like we perhaps would. In context to people coming at us with Bible verses to back up futurist eschatology, I think there's such a grounded dogma around that already. People aren't even going to listen to our arguments even when we present them, and they're going to assume the seasoned preacher who's been preaching things for 30 years, the future, is already right, and he's putting me in my place, and the context is already framed like that. And I think give it more time. Give it a bit more time for this idea to grow and seep in and get into people's minds more. And I think then maybe we'll be in a position ready to actually debate this properly. And we're still trying to finalise and formulate our arguments correctly, because it's kind of like, boy, if someone does present as well, what was the mark of the beast then, or something like that, you know? We don't have a definitive answer, just multiple examples. They want definitive answers. They're like, well, you can't give us a definitive answer, so you're wrong. And that's the issue, you see.
The funny thing about that is they can't give you definitive answers either.
But they would say they can. That's the difference. They're kind of blinded by their
So you're saying
eschatology.
you're more humble.
No, wait, not really, no.
I'm sorry. I'm starting.
Not really, no. What I'm saying is they're very blinded by their indoctrination so far.
Yeah, no, I get it.
And they get very angry
it's more
about
like
it. You know?
the rootness in tradition. And
Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
Well, my
I get it. I
granddad
totally
believed
get
this,
that.
and my mum and dad believed this, and I believed this, and I've never heard this theory before.
Right.
So who the hell are you on YouTube saying these
Right.
things?
Right,
They'll
right,
get
right,
like that,
right,
you know.
right.
And I've heard them get like
For the
that,
fall.
and
Right.
it's sad, but it's we're not quite ready for debate realms yet. I just don't see. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe someone out there is like raring to
respect
go.
that.
Maybe someone out
respect
there is
that,
raring
yeah.
to go, biting at the bit to get in a debate and get in the ring, and all power to them. I'll be there supporting them along the way.
Right.
I just don't think I like to have everything ticked and
Dialed
crossed
in.
off before I get into something like that. You know.
Cross the T's, dot
Gotcha,
the I's,
gotcha.
have the ducks
Yeah.
in a row. I respect that a lot, man. That's what this all needs from both sides. We need to have stuff dialed in to be able to have it easily digested and understand. I really respect that. A lot of
Yeah.
respect for that.
Well, Paul, thank you for coming on, man. Man, it was a pleasure. And, first time, hopefully not your last time. And so we can set some stuff up in the future, man. And it was a really good time. I enjoyed it. Great information, and the foundation of your book. I would like to do another part to this, absolutely, so we can cover more of the clown aspect, the jesters, and the DMT realm of all of that, because it really helps, tie all this in. But real quick, before you go, where the people can find you, and if there's any last message you want to give to the audience.
Sure, yes. So you can find me at Understanding Conspiracy on YouTube. I do also do a live podcast called The Truth of Therapy Sessions on a Sunday on YouTube, but they are also uploaded to an RSS feed and go to all the podcast places. All my live Q&As, which I'm going to go and do after this now, are also uploaded in podcast format to RSS, but they're all live through YouTube when happening. So you can get me on Patreon as well. You can find me anywhere and anywhere you find anything to do with video formats. I'm pretty much on there. I'm on Rumble. I'm on BitChute. I'm on Odyssey. Does Odyssey even exist anymore? I don't even know what's going on. But I'm pretty much everywhere if you just search for Understanding Conspiracy. But you can find the book, The Nephilim Look Like Clowns. It's just on Amazon. Just type in. You can't miss it. And you can get yourself a hard copy, a paperback, or a digital version there. The second book should hopefully be released at the back end of this year. It takes about a year to write a book, I've learned, so give me some time. I'm about a third of the way through the second book. But that's an ongoing project. But you can watch all the videos, summarizing everything for free on YouTube in a playlist called The Nephilim Look Like Clowns. If you want to learn more about the Little Season theory, there's also a playlist dedicated to that as well. I'm on numerous podcasts discussing these concepts, and you know, I know what it sounds like. Believe me, I know what the Nephilim look like clowns sounds like as well. I'm not insane, but give it a go. I think you'll be surprised.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you for your time again. We appreciate you. Real quick before you go, man, we usually pray for our guests right for a little quick moment at the end of the show. So, Heavenly Father, we thank you for, Paul tonight, and just be with him and his family. Keep them safe, and just continue to give him knowledge and wisdom, and to pursue what it is he's doing, and just be there for him as always. And in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Well, hey.
Amen.
Thank you, brother, again. It was a good show. We're going to move right into episode debrief, and see you in the future.
God bless. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. Bangers. Bangers only.
Bangers.
The Biblical Hitman debrief. Man, hey, Paul's a good guy. I really enjoyed that a lot.
I like that dude a lot.
That was a good show. No, he's a good guy, man. He's a good guy. A lot of information. Wow.
Yeah.
Jam-packed with info.
Yeah, man.
I mean, so much to the Nephilim topic. What I really liked about that whole show is that, I mean, from beginning to end, especially with the foundation being laid with Genesis 6, even before that, from the garden to Cain to the cities to the people that were the day 6 humans. I mean,
right.
This is like a topic and that's in the Christian community that really no one really kind of talks about, because they just don't, the theologies aren't like fully there. It's I mean, I've heard some people say, oh, it's what's written in Genesis 1 is the same thing that's written in Genesis 2. And it's like, well, if you're reading it that way, it just seems like you're trying to fill void into something that you aren't understanding because of traditional roots and things of that nature. But I mean, who knows? I don't know. I mean, awesome stuff. Good show. Yep. Paul, thank you. Good stuff. We did kind of get into a lot of, I mean, for about 45 minutes, we got into the little season.
Yeah. He brought up earlier, he was like, awesome. Hey, he was like, I don't know if I'm going to get into, we can save this for another day. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure Stevie's going to ask you about this towards the end.
Well,
it's
I mean,
just so fascinating.
Yeah, I thought we were gonna close a little sooner than we did, but yeah, I really think like what we talked about, we were supposed to talk about, it's just kind of like how these things happen on the show, and it just kind of brought another future topic for the content we're gonna create with them, and the little season. There's a lot to it, and listen, I'm. And he's cool. He seems like he's very humble. The fact that there's a disagreement in the church. There's some people that believe that Satan's been released and his time is short, and he's out deceiving the nations, which makes sense, especially with the history he brings up, and because you got to take those into consideration, right? You got to take those things, and you got to understand that history is being covered up. There's a lot to it. But I also think that, there's a guy, Elon Musk, that's creating things that are way more sophisticated than, historical times before that resemble a lot of characteristics of what we read in Revelation chapter 13, according to the mark of the beast, right hand and forehead. And one thing he did bring up, which was cool, is that he brought up the Roman currency, and that you can only buy and sell with this specific Roman currency. That who was the emperor? Nero. Oh, yeah, pretty bad guy.
Yeah,
pretty bad guy. Killed a lot of Christians.
Yeah.
I mean, if anything, it seems to be that he could fit that Antichrist role. But there's a lot of people in history that can fit that role. What I see, though, is that listening to what he was saying just for a short, brief amount of time, and again, this is like this content should be discussed with like multiple episodes. This isn't just like one episode, little season, and you're gonna get everything out of it. It's something that definitely takes hours and hours of conversation to talk about. But it seems that we see a cycle, right? And we see, especially Doc Brown, right? Doc Brown, he talked about it, right? Things are secular. Things go, history repeats itself. It just seems like a generational theory. I even
Isn't it
remember,
funny how Ecclesiastes gets brung up
well, that's what I'm
every
saying.
single episode?
Well, that's what I'm saying. So if that's the case, then we're seeing a conditioning process rather than something that just happens over and over and over again. It seems like that kind of stuff happens in history in each generation because it's moving you towards, like, I guess maybe the final moment, like the final countdown, the final test. I don't know, the final mark, whatever it may be. But I mean, again, I'd like to be kind of open to it because I do understand the concept that the world can deceive us and that these aliens could be a good thing or they could be a bad thing, right? And then this is like throwing you in a loop for that, Jerusalem is there, New Jerusalem, and it's the whole Thanos twist in the mix because the deception's real, man, and there's with deception comes seduction and all this stuff.
Right.
But hey, I mean, and he did explain himself that he's a thinking person. Like, he's not just someone that's fixated on what he's saying, especially if there is something that's going around that they're forcing you to take something or put something in your body. Like, he's like, well, I'm not going to do that, so which is a good point.
And he has the luxury to, and a lot of us do. Unfortunately, some of the medical industry didn't, and it's kind of a rough situation about that.
Well, I don't like it that people really just jump the gun on people, where they're like, "Oh, you're deceiving a lot of people because of what you're saying, and thus, like, you're deceiving them into taking the mark." And he really made it a point, which I liked, because it's how you have to think, right? It's just a critically thinking, conspiratorial mindset that you stick to.
Yeah, people are getting it more and more now.
Yeah.
They're coming to because of people like us, because of people like Paul, people like even Joe Rogan, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so, it's crazy. I mean, God's working, man.
I don't know why I say even Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan's like the main one. It's like the biggest podcast in the world. Hey, one thing I wanted to say before we take off here is I love the Nephilim hybrids. I love the gigantic trees. I love the Titans. I love that talk so much. And I wanted to bring up a part in Enoch, the book of Enoch, which is not, what do you consider that non-canon, right? It's not in the canon. It's a part of the Ethiopian Bible. But ancient nonetheless. It's a very old book. It's a part of the Ethiopian Bible that he had brought up, and a lot of our guests will bring up in the future. But there's a part in Enoch, and I can't remember which part, but it talks about the size, the height of these giants, and it talks about, I think it says 3,000 ells, and 3,000 ells is a little short of a meter. So the giants were damn near a mile tall.
I mean, if you,
almost a mile tall.
If you remember,
that's 5,280 feet is a mile. Okay, so it would make sense that if they did petrify and they became mountains.
Right.
Like, it's crazy. Man. It's a crazy topic.
It is crazy. But when you kind of look at all this petrified stuff that shows that, like, a mountain looks like a human being, right? It's like, and the whole Himalayan salt thing, right? Like, you brought that up. It's weird. Who knows? I think we really just have to understand how rooted we are in the secular history. Like, not just secular history, but, man, just the world has indoctrinated us since we were right out the womb, which is why I love doing what I do. I love reading the books I read, because there's so much more out there that's hidden. Seems like it's purposely hidden, right? But Paul, we thank you for coming on, brother, and good luck to you and what you got going on, and we'll have you on in the future, man. But
God bless you, buddy. God
everyone
bless
else, have a good night,
kids.
folks. If you're still sticking around, follow us, subscribe, like, share, all the things. We appreciate you. God bless.
Indeed. See you.